Welcome back to the podcast Wrestling with the Word and the World. We are in our fourth series, and this is about Satan's schemes. And this is the fifth episode, and in this episode we will look at Satan's schemes tearing down the foundations. In the previous episode, I said this sentence: through postmodern philosophy, deconstruction of textual meaning, and the application of new progressive hermeneutics, we are made to believe that we cannot and must not trust in the apostolic teaching for today. And now I like to unpack this sentence for the first two elements, the postmodern philosophy and also the deconstruction of textual meaning. And then in the next episode, we will look at the so-called new hermeneutics and how it works and why it doesn't really work for the interpretation of God's Word. In this episode, we will look at 4 time periods and briefly characterize each one of them, and then I will play a little game like Screwtape Letters. First, we will look at life in the Middle Ages, so that's about the time from 500 to 1500s after Christ. And then we will look at the time of the Reformation in the 1500s, followed by Enlightenment and Modernity in the 1600s, and then skipping over the Industrial Revolution in 1750 to 1850, we will look at postmodernity in the 20th century. So first, let us characterize the time of the Middle Ages. And I have 6 points, 6 perspectives, or 6 vignettes about this time period. In the first place, since Emperor Constantine's conversion, we see in the Roman Empire how Christianity is no longer persecuted, but it is first tolerated, then it is accepted, and then finally it is kind of normalized as part of the nature of the Roman Empire. And when that happens, when this becomes the dominant view that is mandated from the top down, this is usually not a good sign for the church. It looks good, and it looks like Christianity is very popular, but here is usually the quality and the integrity of the Christian faith at risk. In the second place, we see that pagan superstition, witchcraft, and the occult continue to be fairly dominant throughout the Middle Ages. And we see some glimpses in artwork, even in church buildings, but also we see this in the fight against the witches. And this has often been portrayed as a caricature where the magic should have been celebrated but actually was put down by the church. Whereas in reality it seems that the church was fighting against the demonic forces that were still publicly at work. In the third place, knighthood is actually intrinsically connected with good things like virtue, courage, and real respect for women. However, number 4, missionary efforts are often connected with political movements between tribes within Europe. Number 5, the Roman Church becomes increasingly ruled by a self-seeking, abusive elite that accumulates and secures wealth and power from and among the commoners in the church. And lastly, there is, however, a deep sense of divine and demonic realities in the culture of that time. Nobody thinks that there is no God or there are no demons. Everybody knows, and people think about that and work this out in their thinking, taking choice, as it were. We come to the second era, and this is the Protestant Reformation after the Middle Ages. And this happens mostly in the 1500s. And you know the names of John Huss, Zwingli, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and John Knox. What happened in this time period? First, there was a gradual, effective resistance that was taking place against idolatrous, oppressive, and power-hungry elites in the Roman Church and in worldly leadership. They were taken to task for what they were doing. In the second place, the basis of this resistance is the authority of the Word of God, to which the leaders must submit and for which they are accountable to their subjects. In the third place, the Bible is the final authority for ecclesiastical and moral disputes. The Bible is translated, printed, and made available to all. Fourthly, the worship of Mary and the saints, as well as the celebration of the Popish Mass, are challenged as idolatries. 5. The criticized church and their leaders use public shaming and cruel torture and murder to suppress the rebellion against their authority and power. And lastly, the public manifestation of the demonic seems to be suppressed over time. The popularity of Satanism, the occult, and witchcraft are diminished. Is Satan chained at this time? Number 3, Enlightenment and Modernity. We're talking about the 1600s and beyond. Following John Locke, man is now viewed primarily as the product of his cultural environment. And there is a trend from communal thinking as a group toward individual thinking. I think, and therefore I am. René Descartes. The third, increasingly divine and demonic influences are ignored or neglected as if they don't exist anymore. 4. There is a great confidence in the human mind using systematic reasoning to derive objective truth. And the scientific method is embraced, and similar methodologies are also used more and more also for social studies and even for theology. 5. Where different parallel methodologies exist, such as in Roman Catholicism, such as in Marxism, such as in Protestantism, there we find socio-cultural silos, groups of people, each with their own leaders, organizations, press, and everything. And lastly, philosophical presuppositions and public morality are increasingly based on presumed self-evident truths rather than on the revealed will of God. Now, in the Industrial Revolution, we see how God is blessing the nations in Europe, particularly those who have followed the Reformation and are no longer under the hierarchy of the Roman Church. And there, specifically in England, we see that gradually over time there are greater blessings in hygiene, in health, in longer life, and in health and wealth for all. Lastly, Postmodernity, the 1900s. Now, first, the objectivity of the scientific method is debunked, especially the presuppositions that were made before the logical, rational process took place are being shown as biased by the people who were doing the scientific exploration. And people like Thomas Kuhn discovered and demonstrated how human biases and worldviews and personal preferences dominated the process in scientific thinking. Secondly, when a group claims to have objective truth, now this is shown as oppressive, where they try to rule and dominate over other people and other groups. And of course, this ties into Marxism and the current cultural Marxism. 3, there is no longer objective truth, because each person must now create his own personal truth. There is no longer objective truth for all. No, everyone has his own ideas about the truth and is therefore free to create his own truth. There is no objective truth for all. There is a personal truth that we must respect in everybody. 4, a historical text that comes to us can have many different meanings. They are dependent on the socio-cultural context of the author and the reader. And therefore, the apostolic letters in the Bible are merely historical documents. There can be many legitimate interpretations of the apostolic teaching, and we must respect those and tolerate those and celebrate those. And lastly, magic and witchcraft become increasingly popular again. Demonic demonstrations are returning, although naturalism and deconstruction have blinded the people's eyes to what Jonathan Cahn calls the return of the gods. Finally, in this episode, last week my wife and we watched a film called Time Changer. And this inspired me to this approach, which is also a little bit like C.S. Lewis's approach in the Screwtape Letters. Imagine somebody is coming to us, traveling through time from a few centuries ago to explore and see how we now live and how we now think in the Western world. So, we have prepared a primer for such a time traveler. Welcome to the 21st century in the Western world. We realize that your original culture may be quite primitive, as you have not yet been enlightened by our irrational and emotional advancements. In order to help you now with progressing and fitting in and feeling at home, we offer you this primer so that you might better comprehend and appreciate the way that we feel about things here today. First, we have come to realize that there is no objective good or evil. As you should know, every cultural group on earth has its own ideas and convictions about such things. What is good? What is evil? And in order to live peaceably together, therefore, we must not pretend or act as if our particular ideas can or must be morally superior to those of others. Respecting other cultures implies that we should not criticize or try to change people for their moral values or lifestyles. We only make exceptions for intolerant Christians who refuse to fit in with the broader society. We are confident that you will grow to understand and appreciate this approach. 2. Since there is no real good versus evil, we must not think that there are good people versus evil people. Unsafe behavior can happen in individuals who have had destructive experiences in the past, in strict families, or especially in conservative church environments. But with proper counseling and positive feedback, there is good hope for a more harmonious functioning in the world today. 3. There is no objective truth, and therefore we must ensure that education allows everybody to create their own truth. It is not the task of educators to teach and pass on truths or values. Teachers must be coaches who guide others to discover and create their own truth. Teachers used to have authority over pupils, but now we realize that actually they are students together, who by sharing feelings and opinions can create truth together. 4. Parenting must actually be a form of partnering. Parents or stewards of younger ones must be very careful with discipline, and all physical discipline is to be avoided at all cost. 5. Human reasoning and statistical so-called facts are not reliable. They were normally utilized by privileged groups which oppressed the others. On the other hand, one's personal feelings, they can never be disputed or challenged. 6. There are no good or evil spirits that must be discerned. And since there is no immaterial or spiritual reality, one's dreams and strong feelings must emanate from the hidden self. For human flourishing to happen, such feelings and convictions must be followed and also respected by all others. 7. Women and men are not only equal in value, they should be able, and encouraged of course, to do the same jobs at equal pay, because they are not really designed or wired in different ways for different functions. And note that these are just two of many genders that people today feel comfortable with. Accept them as they are, or as they say they are. 8. Humans are animals. Science has shown that. And therefore we must not lock other animals up in pens or cages. We must not exploit them, kill them, or even consume them, if they are mammals at least. 9. Fairness in pay must not be based on people's level of productivity, quality, or marketability. Someone's giftedness, experience, or other privilege must not be rewarded with higher pay. That would be unfair. 10. For Christians, we have this advice. When the biblical teaching seems to be in conflict with these currently commonly cultural convictions, it is the task of the church leaders to find alternative interpretations and applications of the ancient text in order to make the gospel more attractive for today's secular minds. Now, if some of these guidelines may be repulsive to you, we can sympathize with you. We recommend that you do not too quickly judge today's culture, for every culture has its own shortcomings. Try to fit in and keep the peace for harmony in unity. We trust and pray that after some time you begin to appreciate the wisdom of the ages accumulated in our time and age, and to begin to feel at home here with us. Welcome and good luck.